I'm Robert Gardiner. I'm a local author and local historian, and I recently published a book about my hometown of Pakenham, Ontario. So I think what inspired me to choose Raised Somewhere Else by Colleen Cardinal was that I've always been attracted to Canadian stories and Canadian history. And this book is indeed very much a Canadian story, and unfortunately not a very pleasant one. It tells the story, or rather the legacy of the 60s scoop, which, similar to residential schools, involved taking Indigenous children away from their parents and away from their communities and placing them elsewhere throughout the country. And so that's sort of what attracted me to this book, is that it truly is a Canadian story and one that should be told, even if it's not the happiest of stories. And so I think Colleen did a very good job of telling this story from her perspective. It showed the legacy of the 60s scoop. You know, it's easy to read in history books that they took Indigenous children away, but you never really know what that means or what the legacy of that is until you read these stories from the survivors of the 60s scoop. And so I think that was probably the most compelling and thought-provoking aspect of the book, was that, you know, in school, of course, we learned about all this, but you never really understand just how traumatizing it was for so many people until you read stories such as Colleen Cardinal's. And I guess what really interested me or fascinated me was that the legacy of the 60s scoop didn't just stop with Colleen, right? She passed down some of the trauma that she had to her children, and so on. In a way, the legacy is still ongoing. It's not really something that just stopped once the 60s stopped, right? It is something that we still live with as a nation today. And Colleen did a very good job, as I said, presenting her story. She wrote with a very much a no-holds-barred sort of approach. You know, she didn't shy away from detail. She didn't shy away from explaining some of the terrible things that happened to her, either growing up or as an adult. And it painted a really vivid picture in your brain of what it was like to be a 60s scoop survivor. So yeah, I think her voice really contributed to telling that story. And frankly, if anyone else had wrote the book, I'm not sure if the story would have been painted so vividly as she was able to. So that was definitely a major takeaway from the book. Some of the central themes of the book speak around, you know, she explains quite a bit about what the 60s scoop was and how it affected many people. But a lot of the themes about her were her own story and how the legacy of the 60s scoop basically remained with her entire life. So she grew up with this trauma, and the trauma just sort of followed her from one relationship to the next, one city to the next, one home to the next. It never really ended. And, you know, throughout, as you read the book, you find yourself rooting for Colleen, right? You want her to get out of a bad situation or get out of a bad relationship, leave that city. And then the cycle of abuse, the cycle of trauma just comes back again. And so it's very much an up and down story, a lot of upsides, but a lot of down as well. And yeah, that's really the main central theme, is that, you know, like I said, the 60s scoop didn't just end. The legacy, the survivors still have to live with that legacy, and Colleen especially had to live with that for many years afterwards. So yeah, that's sort of the main theme, and it touches on societal issues as well, such as the treatment of Indigenous women, missing and murdered Indigenous women, issues such as that, and domestic violence too. Really all sorts of very important topics that are still in the news cycle today. They're still being talked about. And so, yeah, it's important to still tell those stories, especially in today's environment. As far as any memorable quotes or passages that really shine a light on that, I wouldn't say there's any particular specific passage, but One sort of incident that stood out is Colleen was moving to Ottawa. She was looking for a fresh start. She was getting away from her home in Sault Ste. Marie and formerly Edmonton. She was finally putting everything behind her. She was moving to a city she had never been to before, and you thought finally she's escaped her past, if you will, and you find out that the legacy of the 60 Scoop still caught up to her. She wasn't able to outrun her past, unfortunately. And so that was sort of I would say that the peak of the book was really showing that the legacy of the 60 Scoop follows survivors every day of their lives. And so, yeah, ultimately, I think the message or the ultimate takeaway that I got from the book was that stories such as hers need to be told. Because I learned a little bit about that in high school, of course, and university, the 60 Scoop, residential schools, all that. But you don't really understand what it meant to be there or meant to be a victim of that human trafficking, essentially. You don't really understand what it's like to be a victim until you read the victim's stories. And the way Colleen Cardinal presented her story, she presented it so vividly that you really understood what the legacy was and what happened to her. And so that was my ultimate takeaway, was that we need to encourage that these stories come out and that they be told in order to better educate Canadians about situations such as hers, about the 60 Scoop, about other Indigenous issues as well. And so, yeah, that was my ultimate takeaway from the book. And ultimately, I think Race Somewhere Else is worthy of a read, and I definitely think it should be awarded the winning of this contest. So, yeah, thank you for watching.